welcome to episode 227 of the Crate and Crowbar. It's the 22nd of February. I'm Tom Francis, and with me here are...
Alex Wiltshire.
And...
Philippa War.
Hello.
Hello.
Philippa War.
What?
Philippa War.
Well, it's because you'd roused me from my consideration where it's the 22nd of the second month. So I was like, it's
the twos.
Lots of twos, and it's 227, and I'd started thinking about that, to be honest. I was quite surprised I remembered my name in time.
This won't happen again until the 22nd of February next year. Fun fact for you, calendar fans.
But yeah, so I thought I'd covered that over magnificently. Thanks, Alex.
Philippa War.
The thing is, we spend the rest of the podcast calling me Pip anyway, so it just doesn't make sense.
Actually,
anyway.
someone linked a really old Crate and Crowbar, and I started listening to it, and it must have been before you were on it at all, and I mentioned you, and I called you Philippa. I thought, that's weird, I haven't called you that since then, probably.
It's how she wants to be called, and then everybody's been calling her Pip.
How are you both?
I'm cold, but I'm good.
Really? I got a hoodie if you want it.
You do?
Yeah.
I'll put it on.
Yeah, like Tom is somehow in the temperate area of the living room.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened there.
With his sleeves up and his cold beer out.
Yeah, it's like it's summer over here. This is like
I came in, I took my coat off, thought, I'm cold. I put my hoodie on. I put my hoodie on, then thought, I'm hot. And I took my hoodie off. And then Alex said he's cold. And that's the story of the hoodie.
I'd like to point out that there is no condensation on your glass at all. That's saying you shouldn't be drinking this. It's like hot toddy time.
I think it's, if you can put the beer outside to cool down and drink it, then it's still good beer. Which is always true, I think.
If you can put beer outside, then it's good to drink.
That's my rule. I'm sticking to it. I didn't think it entirely through.
Wow, that's sure. You're gonna love our pond if you just like drinking outside things.
Probably would make quite a heady experience.
I remember seeing a great
spawn at the moment.
Yeah.
A great picture of someone somewhere in North America where it snows like 3 feet and you get completely snowed in, and they open their front door and it's just a wall of snow, except they've tucked all their bottles of wine into it and then just withdraw them. And
there's a thing you can do with like frozen sort of snowdrifts, and I think it's like maple syrup. You put the maple syrup on it and it like freezes into sticks or something. Like
you sort of dribbles
I can't
down
remember
and
if
then
there's more to
hardens as
it,
it
but
falls
yeah,
down.
like it basically just seemed like sugar sticks. But yeah,
nice. There's some other news though. It's not the only news we have for you. You might be reeling from that, but the news that it's always good to drink beer and that maple syrup freezes. We have some Crate and Crowbar news, in fact, first, which is that we're going to be doing a live show at Resd on April the 14th, which is the Saturday. At 4:30pm, it's going to be me, Chris, and Graham, and might just be us, or we don't know who else yet. And that's, like I said, it's the Saturday of Resd, which is in London, and the Saturday usually sells out, so if you want to get a ticket soon, that would make sense. And we'll go to the pub afterwards. You do need a Res ticket to go to the live podcast. You probably don't need a Res ticket to go to the pub.
No, I believe a bunch of people like that couldn't make it in the daytime came along to the pub afterwards because it's usually on the Saturday, I think, is when RPS does its meetup and stuff.
Yeah, I think in fact the pub might be RPS's meetup. We might just be hijacking that. I
remember last year we were competing with a pub quiz that was also happening. I think that was by possibly Maybe develop?
There might be something like that, mightn't it? Or Eurogamer.
Yeah, I can't remember whose pub quiz it was.
But games industry.
Yeah, I think so. I should know that. I don't need to know that anymore. So I might just go along as a punter. Or maybe I'll walk past the podcast and go, and sail on.
You heckle us from the crowd. Shut up, you're boring.
What about console games?
Tell me more about Subnautica.
Oh, that would no
Not
problem
as good
lighting
as
that
what
heckler.
Pip's on here.
Philip, a war!
What happens if you put maple syrup on snow?
Is it okay to drink this beer now?
So I think we've sufficiently upsold that. Oh, are you doing anything else at Res?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be talking about heat signature the next day on Sunday. I think I'm being interviewed in some capacity.
Oh.
Sounds great. Sounds like a talk that you don't have to write.
Nice.
Of course, there's the potential for me to say something stupid.
But then you don't get to edit it.
Yeah. And yeah, that should be fun. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be like demoing a game or anything because I don't think Wizards will be ready, and heat signature is too far in the past. Wizards is too far in the future. There are a couple other little bits of news. So I didn't know, this isn't new news, but I didn't know it. Imbroglio is coming to PC, which is Michael Bro's game that's so far only been on iOS. And I don't think he's released anything on PC since 868 Hack, but he's been merrily making games on iOS alone. And Imbroglio is the one where it's a roguelike where each top-down, move around a maze kind of thing, and when you attack an enemy, how much damage you do and what the effects of your weapon are dependent on the tile you're on. So you sort of lay out a grid of weapons, and then you move around that grid, and wherever you're standing, that's the weapon you're using. Which is a really cool idea and works really well. And also is crying out to be on PC because it's really fiddly. The interface for it is really bad. Making these, laying out those weapons is so... You've got to drag them, but it keeps slipping and putting them back where you don't want them and stuff. It's going to work so much better on PC. It's going to be a little while, apparently, because I think he still wants to do another expansion to it first on iOS and then port it. And the reason I was reading about this is because I was actually reading up on his new game, Cinco Paus, which is not announced for PC at all. Although hopefully what he's doing is just very, very slowly and belatedly bringing them, to PC eventually. And that is one where you have 5 wands, each of which has 5 different effects, none of which you know. And you can only find out their effects by using them, but any effect that doesn't apply to the situation won't get revealed. So if it duplicates treasure and you fire it and you don't hit any treasure, you won't find out about that. And even if you do find out about it, you just get a little icon that's really cryptic, and the icons are tiny. And if you want to look up what those icons mean, you can do so, but the entire game's in Portuguese.
And he believes it's one of his more accessible games.
Yeah, Michael Bro is surprised that the 868 hack is sort of selling better than this because he feels this is the accessible entry point to his work. I can't see that in the angle.
Is it in Portuguese for a reason? Is it because that's a really widely spoken language, or is it because
partly.
he?
I think that was the latter. I think he's living in
actually in Portugal.
Oh, okay.
He's in a Portuguese-speaking country. And
so he's
doing a
language.
Portuguese class.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And everyone else in his class are using the language at work. And he was thinking, I don't get to use language at work because I just sit at home making games in English. And he thought, well, I can make it in Portuguese. And so it's not even apparently he hasn't even had it checked or anything. It's just his best stab at Portuguese.
It's not even potentially even incorrect Portuguese.
Yeah.
Could he submit it for credit on his course?
Probably. He's not too worried about it because he made it with that in mind, and so he tried to make it so you didn't need to read too much text to understand it. But it sure doesn't feel that way when you play it. I feel like I'd really like to know what that icon means if that's the only information I ever get. I really want to know what that actually says. Assassin's Creed's educational mode is out. Assassin's Creed Origins.
I think that came out yesterday.
Yeah, I think you downloaded
lunchtime.
yesterday for me.
That is the mode where you can go around the whole world, but all of the combat is removed. There's no threat, there's no quests to do or anything, but there are all these tours added. Is it something like 70 different tours scattered all over the world?
I'm not sure.
It's a huge number.
Or is it locations that have things to read about in them or something?
Yeah, so I don't know.
There's another change as well.
What's that?
They covered up all the rude bits on all the statues.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there are all these Venuses. There are all these Venuses with scallop shells over them.
Oh, God.
Oh, good Lord.
Is that like an American school thing, do you think?
Potentially, yeah.
It's
The thing is, there are some brothels with extremely explicit Roman paintings on them. Have you noticed them?
I haven't played it at all. I was waiting for the Discovery Tour, but then I didn't have quite enough time before you lot turned up, so I booted some other things up instead. So yeah, so this is all a mystery to me because I didn't want to involve myself in anything to do with Assassin's Creed because I never do. So I was very much waiting until I could tap out and just have a wander.
It's a good wander game.
Yeah, and apparently you can fly around as the Eagle, which is the main thing I like doing in Assassin's Creed in Origins. And that's awesome. Also, the photo mode is in there, so you can like pose the camera and change all the settings. I think you can even change like time of day with that.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
Yeah.
So messing around with that and flying around as an eagle are the two best things in Assassin's Creed Origins. And this mode it's free for anyone who already owns the game, but also it's like 15 quid if you want to buy it by itself. And so then you just get the whole world, the whole of the game world. Should clarify.
Assassin's Creed.
You don't get actual
Argentina is yours as well.
But yeah, that seems really good. Like if I hadn't already bought the game, I'd probably buy just the educational mode.
Yeah, same.
Just to run around it, look around it. The game is not like terrible. I quite enjoyed most of the sort of stabby stuff.
Yeah,
and it's got a good structure actually in terms of like taking over outposts and getting resources. It's got quite a good like addictive loop there, but it is just killing people and slaughtering animals.
Slightly janky killing stuff, yeah. And being with your character saying how much he venerates crocodiles because they are holy to him, and as a man
says this
upholding
like 20 hours into the game.
Lords, the holy lords of his place, and he gets really angry with a bunch of Romans and things who come in and slaughter them. Having just slaughtered about 12 crocodiles.
I'm wearing 20 crocodiles
because he
right
wanted
now.
to make a pouch for his tinctures.
So much of my armour is made of crocodiles.
Religion. God.
So yeah, it's janky, but I found it very fun.
Yeah.
But it's
I think
beautiful.
I'll definitely tinker around with the world either tomorrow or over the weekend because,
And if you can walk around and then go into the tombs and things, that's great as well. That's what I really love, kind of going into the tombs as much. Yeah.
I think essentially I've more and more started to prefer photo modes and things because especially with big games they're so greedy for your time, and especially like Ubisoft do that kind of like proper sort of time land grab, I guess,
and little loopies to get you
and I think that's really good if that's the game that you bought and will spend hundreds of hours in and have an affection for the series. Like, I'm not undervaluing that. It's more just that because that is so not the luxury that I have at the moment with games, it's that it adds to the frustration rather than the appeal, I would say.
The System Shock reboot had a sort of alarming announcement on their Kickstarter that they are taking a hiatus in order to change direction, like reevaluate what they're doing. And the post was basically, the gist of it was the Kickstarter campaign was a success and they got loads of money and they got 1.3 million, I think. And actually, that isn't much more than what they asked for. I think they might have asked for like 1 million.
And that's not an awful lot for a project.
It's not go crazy money, but they seem to have gone crazy. So they started adding more, taking it further from a remake. Originally it was just going to be a remake and more into a reboot, and promising like whole new sections that weren't in the original game and all this other stuff. And their post sort of says like, we now realise this was probably a mistake since people actually want us to remake the original. And they changed engines, and I think they're out of money, or I don't know, that might be speculation actually. But yeah, it's
the post was kind of quite, it was from the game director or the head of the company, so I can't remember his name, but it felt like he was quite anxious to say that changing the engine was that was a really good decision. That was a good decision, but the game had gone awry, like what they were making suddenly. Oh dear. I wonder whether some of it came from a conflict, whether official or simply kind of spiritual, with the fact that the other side, is it Other Side Studio?
One is called Other Side and one is called Night Dive. I think it's Night Dive who are doing the remake.
That's right. And Other Side Studio, who are currently making the Ultima Underworld update, or a new one of those, and they're making System Shock 3. Yeah. Huh. So Warren Spector is head of that studio, which is in Austin. And they're making a bona fide System Shock sort of follow-up. You know, and I wonder whether there's a conflict if they ended up making a game which is sort of less of a reboot and more of another game.
I think there's like two things here, right? It's at what point you move away from the thing that you got the funding for, because if that's what people paid for and invested in, then surely there are questions to answer legitimately in terms of, well, if you're no longer making the thing I invested in, then you know that's one side of it. And
especially also, when that's founded on that demo, which was like, it felt, you know, maybe not in all details, but like, yes, this is System Shock. Yeah.
They had sorry.
I was just going to say also, in every single dissection of a thing, every single like post-mortem of a game, what went wrong, what we learned, no one has ever looked back on an engine change and gone, that was an amazing idea. That was the best thing we could have done. That wasn't at all a massive stress and caused us 1 million hours more work and was massively expensive.
I remember the Dreamfall follow-up. They said it nearly destroyed their studio just to switch from like Unity 4.2 to Unity 4.5. It was just going up on the Unity thing was such a huge headache that it, you know, cost them like 6 months of work or something. They nearly ran out of money. The System Shock reboot Kickstarter had 3 different like stretch goal systems to it. So they only hit 3 stretch goals. The stretch goals went all the way up to like 3 million. But then they also have a separate system for like if you share the Kickstarter campaign enough or download the demo enough, like when they hit certain milestones, that translates to like backer mission points. And then if you get enough backer mission points, then certain other things about the campaign change so that like individual features get upgraded and have new aspects to them. And like 10 of those were met. So my picture is too small to read what those were, but those are all extra things that on top of the basic game. Yeah. I really want to see the Kickstarter campaign that's just like, here's our stretch goal system, and it's like 25 notches, all these different amounts of money, and it just says, we're increasingly sure we're going to make this game. Increasingly sure, we're really very sure we're going to make this game at this point. And like after this, I'm definitely going to make this game.
Yeah, I think the other thing is like, I do wonder how much those extra tiers benefit. Like I'd be genuinely interested to read whatever research has been done or data collection, because I wonder whether it's that people put money in, like more money into a thing just because they have a particular amount that they want to invest in. Okay, there's a cool thing attached to it, but it's not the point of it. So, you know, maybe just different money tiers would be better than here's a poster and a dinner with my dad or something. It's like,
yeah, it's weird because it's like the people you get the money from at the stretch goal phase are people who almost certainly don't give a shit about the stretch goals because they're people who have not actually backed it yet. They're people who had not yet decided to back this thing.
And they usually jump in because suddenly they think, oh, it's a done deal. Like the psychology of it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's loads of people on the fence and like, I guess things like adding Linux support is quite a common stretch goal. And so, yes, you get the Linux audience might back you. And that's small, but they are pretty passionate. So that's probably not zero. But I would willing to bet most of the extra money you get after you hit your goal is from new people hearing about it who didn't know about it before. And whether they back it or not is probably not going to be affected by the stretch goals. So I assume they exist to motivate existing backers to then like campaign on your behalf and try and get other people to back because they want these extra features.
Yeah.
But so many have like Kickstarter backers, or certainly potential Kickstarter backers have such fatigue about this now and they're so tired of things they back not coming out and going off the rails that I think you would win more credit with them just saying we're not doing any stretch goals.
I think the only thing that to go back to like tier rewards rather than stretch goals, I think the only thing that I have ever deliberately backed at a higher tier than I was going to was Beasts of Balance because I wanted that ghost crab. Or whatever it was. I don't remember why it mattered so much to me at the time, but it really did.
So Beasts of Balance is a game that I used to be on the Dev Studios.
So I could have just shaken you down for this nonsense.
It was a game where you balance plastic toys on a plinth, and that speaks to and we had a stretch goal for a ghost crab.
And I wanted it. Yes, and now I will need to find somewhere to put it.
But that sort of stuff where it makes sense, where it's expanding the game. It's like sort of like, do you want the deluxe edition or do you want the standard edition? That that kind of that
That's
makes sense.
true. I will never. I don't. Well, never is instantly opening myself up to the one exception or whatever. But I just don't care for video game posters. I don't care for.
Do you not plaster them all over the wall? I can't see a single one in this house.
I know, I'm a massive letdown, aren't I? It's terrible. I have my Firewatch pictures up on the thing, although they're the ones I took myself, not the ones that you can order through the game.
Oh, did you print them yourself?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, I got a set through the game, so I'm not a total monster.
Cheapskate.
What a monster you'd be to print your own screenshots.
But I preferred mine because because one of the annoying things about film cameras and why they have perhaps fallen out of favour partly is because you don't have that level of control. You don't get to take 50 shots of one scene and then pick the nice one. You kind of look through and go, not a single one. Interesting. Well, that cost me £7.
And waiting for weeks for it to be
exactly
delivered.
That's all the news. What have you guys been playing? What have you been playing, Alex? Because Pippa's drinking.
I've been playing Legendary Gary.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this.
It's by I'm gonna look this up.
It's not by Gary.
It's not by Gary.
This much we know.
It's one of the developers behind Whatever Happened to Edith Finch? No. Where on earth is Edith Finch?
Edith Finch.
Edith Finch. It's the cold. It's getting to my mouth.
Where on earth is Edith Finch?
What is it called? I'm forgetting everything.
What remains?
What remains?
Oh, I see. Sorry, I thought you were trying to think of a similar game, not Edith Finch.
So,
did you hear about Edith Finch?
Whatever happened to her?
What's eating Edith Finch?
Are you there, God? It's me, Edith.
So it is a game in which you play a character who's playing a game, and it's really weird. It's kind of really beautifully drawn. It's all been drawn by the developer, whose name I'm really struggling to find it, and I don't know why. This is Gary lives in the basement of his mother's house, and he has a dead end job, or in fact, I don't think he has a job when the game starts. He has a conversation with his mum and discovers that she has given all of her husband's health insurance, who he's obviously died, to a preacher who's preaching about the end of the world, and so they're broke. And Gary's got this. He's in his 20s or so, and things aren't looking particularly great for either of them. And his mother's in total denial about it all. And he kind of finds escape in a video game called Legend of the Spear, which is clearly sort of meant to evoke Final Fantasy or that kind of thing. But it is all drawn by the developer, who's called Evan Rogers, and he has a really nice line art style, very decorative, beautiful use of colours, and he's animated it all himself. And kind of, so his room is really detailed, sort of line, sort of almost pencil drawings, with lots of details on his desk and things. But you're sort of pointing and clicking him around, and you're talking to characters, and it's very linear. But then you can choose to click on his computer and you can play the game, and it's all controlled in the same way, but it has battles in it, and the battles are turn-based strategy game. where when it's turnover, you line up the moves you're going to make with your characters, and then it's turnover, and then everybody moves then at the same time, and it's all played on a hex grid, and it ends up being quite an interesting sort of almost balletic kind of fighting, where because it then replays it when you win a fight, and you get to see how you dodged back and then came back it again and wound up for a hit and then hit them out, and then it's really nicely done. I mean, it's not by any means a perfect strategy or tactics game. Like, it's because he focuses so much on his art, and they're all sort of 2D big sprites. If one character is standing on a hex in front of another character, suddenly you can't quite see what's behind them, and there are some little problems like that, which might become more annoying as the game goes on. I'm probably about 2 hours into it now, but it's kind of beautiful, and it's all done by himself. So it's kind of, and you kind of feel that you can excuse the little kind of issues like that. But it's, while it's him on his own, he hasn't stinted on little sort of details and kind of sort of filigree stuff. So I saw a scene yesterday where we're driving to the mall, to a supermarket, where he's going to beg for a job from his old boss, and his friend drives him there because obviously Gary can't drive because he's a sort of total dropout, and his friend asks him to stick his finger up at some guy in a car next to him, and you get to click on the finger to choose, and you can choose which finger. And you go to the little one, and you go, yeah. And it's little choices of things like that, and little sort of non sequitur, but kind of like sort of enriching little moments like that. One-off little interactions.
Did you try clicking the wrong finger?
I didn't. You only get one chance. But I thought, let's go the whole
in life. You only get one chance to.
But that's an interesting thing, actually. So it has this kind of little light system in it as well called willpower. And often you'll be in a conversation and you'll have a number of choices, and one of the choices will only be open to you if you have enough willpower safe, in your bank, and you get willpower for quite surprising things. So at the very start of the game, you're in this awkward conversation where you're basically being told off for playing too many games, and when you say and oh come on, you get one willpower for being frustrated. But then, so it's kind of like, it's quite sort of, it plays around with your expectations. But then later on, I saw a conversation where the option that I wanted to say, but I kind of wasn't sure that I should say it, was, I can't remember what the conversation was about, but it was like an annoying conversation about, I think Gary's girlfriend is on the phone and she's got something to tell me, and I want to play the game tomorrow, and she wants to meet up instead, and I wanted to say, nope, I want to play the game, and I could have chosen that option, but I played it out, and then the next time, in the next choice, the next willpower one, the cost had inflated. So it's kind of quite playful. Like, I can make this option now before I'm sure that that's a good option. But in the next time when I suddenly realise that was probably a good option, now I'm kind of priced out of it.
So it costs more willpower because you've already semi-committed to the other option?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know about the logic of it.
Modeling social awkwardness.
I think it's just a social awkward. It's the sort of like, oh, damn it, if I just said it then...
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Then it'd probably be in a better position. And now the conversation's gone too far and I can't say that.
Yeah, there's like a group emails where you're just about to suggest something and someone else suggests the opposite, and you're like, oh fuck, now I don't think I should. I don't want an argument about it.
And like, also, I guess to a lesser extent, the graph of time passing against at what point you can, or the effort that it will take to remind someone that you're not actually called whatever they're talking, whatever name they're using for you.
I'm not called Alan. No, willpower 1. The next day, willpower 6. I'm not called Alan.
Like, oh no.
The next week you see them, willpower 500 million.
Or equally, like,
I'm Alan now, I guess.
Equally, like when you do meet someone, what's your name is like 0 willpower when you meet them, but like 3 days later, if you didn't ask it at first, it's like 25 willpower now. It's going to be really weird to somebody else. Who are you actually?
I'm interested to see how far he takes that system, because it's like it's evidently like I don't think there's any particular sort of big causal things that are, big decision trees going on in the game. I think that it's quite carefully curtailed, but it's like I'm interested to see how far it goes. But yeah, as the game goes on, you start to realise that things in the game have resonances happening in real life, and that's kind of reflected in some of the game systems. So there's a garden outside the front, and his mum says, "Go and go and tend to the garden," and the plants that you grow there will give your characters in the game additional skills for as long as you bother to water them. So it's kind of little sort of Animal Crossing style kind of busy work game that kind of. But also, they might have some choice over which ones you nurture as well.
Does your success in the game within the game have any bearing on the game?
So I haven't come up to any fail states yet. So so you can rewind. So in combat, I lost one of the characters because I hadn't dodged her out the way. And when that happened, I realised, I should have chosen that for her because I think I'd have thrown danger. And indeed, I did, and she got killed. But then you can rewind your turns as far back in the combat as you like, and you get to see, there's also a good preview system, so you can see what the computer is about to do in its turn, so you can kind of make good choices. So it's not been challenging yet, but it's been plenty to think about during the combat. I wouldn't say right now that it's a very deep or kind of massively meaningful kind of combat system, but it's fun. It's fun, but yeah, it's I'm interested to see where it goes next. And I said that it was a sort of redolent of Final Fantasy. It's mostly in the logo because actually it's much more fantastical and surreal and weird kind of game than that. Like the kid, I spoke to a lobster guy, and there are these weird kind of water imps that I had to have a fight with, and there are, it's very surreal and kind of sort of, you haven't played a game set in a world like this before. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a long game. Probably about 5 or 6 hours, I believe it ends up being. But yeah, it's a nice, interesting game. Legendary Gary.
Is it a few quid? Is it free? Is it?
Good question. I think it's like 12 quid or something like that. So that might be a kind of it was only released this week, so. See, so yeah, it's £11.39 right now, but that might be on offer.
I see. Thank you. I may check this out.
What have you been playing, Pip?
I've been in that weird thing of not really settling. So there's I tried playing Faye, which is the EA indie thing by Zoink, which came out recently about it's a colourful forest and what seems to be a kind of colourful forest sprite creature that sings at things and they kind of respond, but like I don't know whether it's me not being in the right mood, but I'm not feeling it. I tapped out after about half an hour because I was just like, okay. Because I think maybe it's just because I tend to get sent those games. So I've seen quite a lot of them. So maybe it's more the sort of thing that, you sort of not get used to after a while, but, there are quite a lot of very pretty forests with quite a lot of very lovely animalistic kind of
totally
sprites.
Non-verbal?
It seems to be, although there are text prompts that pop up to tell you to sing at things. And I'm just sort of like trotting around, activating platforms and getting to new sections. And I think there is a kind of pleasure at points, but it's just really not clicking for me. And so it's like, okay, well, this is the type of plant that makes a little fan of air that takes you up to the next thing. And it's like, yes.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Sure. Yeah. And, I'm sort of riding around on a deer at the moment, and that's like, okay.
If they are kind of engineered to delight you, aren't they?
But it isn't.
Yet.
And the deer animation is really annoying me at the moment. Like, it jumps in a weird way that is clunky. It's clunky. And I don't like how... Because it feels very much more for controller than mouse and keyboard, which, I get. That's fine. But even on that, it doesn't quite feel smooth. And you really need it to be for this kind of thing. So I don't want this to be like the definitive thing that I say about the game. I will try and go back in case it was just a case of it not catching me at the right mood, or me having just not quite hit the point where it gets going. But it feels a lot like one of those games that is very friendly to trailers or presentations and things, but I'm not finding the magic when it's actually in my hands. So
I know what you mean. I've felt that that sort of weariness in those kind of games. I was trying to unpick why, and there's something I do find the way they lay out your motivations for playing a little bit. They're so similar. Like, cute creature sort of loses something, or something dies, the home is destroyed or something like that, and must go on a journey, all told without words, all stuff that I've probably written sort of stuff eulogizing the first few times it was done,
Ori and the Blind Forest.
Yeah.
See, I would prefer to wait for the next Ori game than like if I wasn't sort of keeping an eye on these things for work, I would have just gone, okay, well, this isn't for me. I'm going to go back to waiting for the sequel to the thing that I love.
Yeah.
So
it's funny though. Like, what I find sort of slightly sort of upsetting is that if this came out like 5 years ago, maybe, what would that take us back to? That would be 2013, maybe a bit earlier. So like 2011, 2010, you'd think this is incredible. This is just beautiful. Look at the expressionistic nature of this. Look at the way we're just being guided through a beautiful world, and it's all us. It's like steering our own direction, and now it feels, I've done this before.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. But also it has other, like I was saying, the clunkiness of dealing with this deer really early on is, it sort of makes me, I can't help but think of things like Future Unfolding, which just is so much better at generating those moments of surprise and wonder, because this I should stress that I've played maybe half an hour of it, so but that feels like it should have hooked me somehow by then, right? But in that time it hasn't shown me anything I haven't seen elsewhere, right? There's a singing mechanic which is kind of annoying.
It's a bit like the going about in the sand, skating down the sand game.
Journey.
They
almost called it that, actually. Going about in the sand, skating down game. They are called That Game Company, so they're international titles.
But yeah, so you press your right trigger on the controller to sing at a thing, and if you hold it down, it sort of sings quite aggressively, and that's bad. You shouldn't. So you sort of have to find the sweet spot of pressing the thing, and I'm just a bit like, okay, it hasn't got anything about it that has delighted me yet. It's just, okay, these are the systems.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm just imagining a subtitle saying aggressive singing.
But that's the thing, it's it really should have doubled down on that with the world kind of covering its ears, or flipping into an evil version or something, but it hasn't. It just didn't trigger the thing, and then you're like, okay, well, I've now sung at a thing, and it has generated the mushrooms to grow bigger caps, so I can.
So it's just an arbitrary.
It's
an arbitrary just sort of result to every time you think.
Well, it's I don't know that it's arbitrary, because, like I say, I'm so early in. But it's there are just so many things I've seen before. What was the game? Is it Seasons After Fall, where you're that little fox that goes around and you flip between seasons? And so I think it's in the autumn. If you flip to autumn, then the mushroom caps are like full out, so you can use them as platforms and stuff. And that was kind of an interesting, it had the interesting sort of element of that. Whereas this is like, okay, well, I did the thing that triggered the thing, and now I've got the mushroom caps out. Okay, cool, right. And then I tried jumping on them, and I was sort of slow because I was like, oh, okay, I'll have a little look around because it feels like a looking around game. But then they folded back in on themselves, so I had to sing again to reopen them, and I was like, so that was that. But the other thing...
Eurogamers, just quickly on Fae,
Fae. Well, I checked on the on their own dev blog on YouTube, and they call it Fae. Okay. So, and that chimed with what I'd been calling it. So,
Eurogamer strap for it was very good, which is noisy, cutish, and short.
Nice. I saw that. Yeah. But so the other thing that I started playing but have had to stop for reasons of intellect is Matthew Brown's new thing, because Matthew Brown is the person who created things like hex cells and stuff, which is the sort of Picross adjacent puzzle games series, and Square Cells, which sort of dips a bit further into maths puzzling. So he's done this thing which is really cool in that it's essentially an interactive museum that takes you through the history of cryptography.
Oh, it's that game, yes.
Yeah, and so it starts off with things like plain text ciphers, which are relatively straightforward to uncover. You get one in Oblivion. It's the when the beginning letter of each paragraph tells you where you need to go in the city. It's stuff like that, which is, it's not actually encoded, it's just hidden within text in a particular way. And then it sort of goes through different rooms, ramping up the complexity as you go through history. And it's interesting because personally it's interesting because I did a mode on a module of cryptography at university because I needed to make up some extra credits in my first year, and that was the only maths.
You saw the blockchain coming.
Well, that was the only maths course they would let non-maths students do. So I figured this would just be easy as, and it was really interesting, but it was also a really easy credit for me because I was like, yeah, I've just dropped out of a maths degree, so this is all just stuff I kind of have at my disposal. So that was nice. But this kind of goes through pretty much the course trajectory that I did, but I've forgotten so much, and I was so, oh god, really struggling with it and thinking, oh, am I that bad at this? And then I realised how many years it's been since I graduated. I'm like, oh. And it was one of those real, oh no, yeah, I now feel old and inadequate and really want to go back to my parents' house and find my university notes just so that I'm not beaten by this game. So there's a kind of now a personal pride at stake. But I do find myself thinking that it would be more fun to do it as a group of people, because it was me and two other people on that course, because the maths students weren't allowed to do that course for some reason.
What is that?
I know,
a maths module we can only do if you're not doing maths.
We can't let these maths students come into this. The forbidden knowledge.
They're too powerful already.
And so I sort of was on my way home the other day thinking, oh, it'd be really nice to see Matthew and Greta again and just like do this like almost like a course revision kind of thing, or like, just sort of getting stuck into some of it ourselves, like together, and do the
This must be like a nightmare for some people. Is like there's someone from university comes back and says, let's do revision together.
I know.
No, it's over, isn't it?
This is why no one accepts my Facebook friend requests, I tell you. But anyway, yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So obviously you start off with these plain text ciphers, and then you move on through things, like what's it called? The Julius Caesar kind of method, where things shift by a certain number of letters, and you can sort of figure out using frequency of letters appearing, what they actually map onto in the regular alphabet. You know, you can kind of basically do frequency analysis and then slide the alphabet along until it actually fits with how the regular alphabet looks, you know, with things like E.
Is that how, like,
and
Rock
S
13
and T
works?
and things. I don't know.
That's sort of a common, like, really simple cipher that we use for, like, disguising spoilers, where it's trivial to crack, but
yeah, like you,
just
but you
means
just
you
can't
don't read
read
it in
it
natural language.
instantly.
Way,
Yeah. So those were kind of.
How does it teach you them? Like as you're playing?
Well, it's interesting because it kind of tells you it's like going to a museum exhibition, and so you sort of go into a room and there's an explanation. Yeah, and there's an explanation on the wall in front of you as if it was, you know, a thing at the V&A or at the National Portrait Gallery or something. But at every station where you would normally have, I don't know, a work of art or an exhibit or whatever, it's actually an example of the code, and in the little pedestal in front of you, you have a little terminal where you can either ask for a hint or input the solution to the thing that's on the wall. And so that's really cool. But so the difficulty just escalates so quickly, because code breaking kind of, with the advent of more recent technology and, you know, the sort of the cipher wars of various actual wars, things have become so much more complicated and so much more than a human being brain can often hold in their heads. So it's things like I'm wondering, because it's gated off some of the rooms because I haven't solved enough puzzles to get there, but I'm really wondering what it's going to do when you do get there, because there's some stuff that's essentially like part of doing it is to multiply two astronomical primes together and then do stuff with that, with like modulo functions and things like that. And so I'm kind of like, I don't know, I don't remember enough to get there, so I'm wondering what tools the game will give you, or whether it's more just a kind of whistle-stop tour through the history of cryptography, and if you want to solve it, you can, and maybe you join a subreddit or something, but it's maybe not necessarily a thing that you do solo, or as a kind of The Witness style progression. It just wouldn't be. But the other thing is kind of because of that sort of sudden explosion of the way that we need to encrypt information and use that, it's interesting because essentially the first maybe 2 rooms cover so much of human history, and then like the rest of it will presumably be, you know, the last 100 years, right? So that's kind of interesting. Like I'm stuck on the Visioneer cipher room at the moment, I think, because that's like what it is it's a version of the one where you change, where you just shift a letter by a certain number of positions. But what you do is you have a code word that you and the recipient know. And so it's so hard to think how to describe this.
I know what you mean.
But yeah, essentially you have the message, and then you go through it with every single character sort of marking out. So say the word was cats. You know, you would write CATS over each character, like one at a time.
That's what I do in reading anyway. Cats.
And then each one of those would get ciphered in the 4 different ways. So the first one would get the C.
It's shifted to C.
Shifted to C. The next one's and so you can crack that, but it's a combination of doing that frequency analysis that I was talking about, and also looking out for repeated patterns so that you can guess the length of that code word that is being used.
You see, I'm faintly concerned about when you get up to kind of like the Enigma machine level.
That room is closed to me, Alex. I will never know if that's
It's a mercy. It's a mercy. Because like they had, the Bletchley Park had hundreds of cryptographers working on this. So
they did. I always wanted to make a game about not the actual sort of maths of cryptography, but the stuff surrounding it, the strategy stuff, where when the Germans had like a different code word each day for their codes that the Enigma eventually cracked. There was a time when Bletchley could crack it if they knew the code word, but getting the code word each day was, if you don't know the code word, you can't do it at all. If you and getting the code word is obviously difficult because it often takes more than one day to do it, and then the things you're intercepting aren't relevant anymore. So, but if you know what message was being sent, you can reverse engineer the code word from that. So if you don't know the message and you don't know the code word, you've got nothing. If you know the code word and you don't know the message, you can find out the message. But if you don't know the code word, if you do know the message, you can reverse engineer it. So what they'd do is they would actually fly a plane out to a particular place where they knew there was a commander who always reported things in the same way, and they knew he would report a plane going overhead in the same way every time he saw it. And they would intercept that communication, and they knew the message, exactly what the message would say, because it would say the same thing every time. And so they could reverse engineer what the code word was for that day.
Oh, that's amazing. Have you read Cryptonomicon?
No.
Man. This is Neil Stephenson book, so the Snow Crash author. And it is a very thick book that basically covers the history of cryptography from the Second World War onwards. So there's it has various different kind of sort of threads running through it, but so part of it's set in the present day and part of it's set during the Second World War. But it's like it goes into how the cryptography systems work and kind of but what is really interesting is about the sort of if you've broken the enemy's code, you kind of don't want to give them any sense that you've done that. So it follows a group of people in the Second World War whose job it was to put messed up information that the Germans would capture about what the Allies knew. So they would go off and do operations that would randomize the information that the Germans would get, and it's just fun, rip-roaring kind of tale, but it's got loads of kind of detail about this stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, I tell a lie. I've got slightly beyond that room, but only by dint of solving enough earlier puzzles, I think. And the next room is more about puzzles that involve different things from other elements of life. So I think there's one that maybe taps into music, and there's I can't remember which room is introducing which thing at this point, because there's so much different information at play. But there'll be other things where maybe you need a bit of Morse code to follow it and stuff like that. So those are sometimes the extra information is on the wall of that museum room or something, but more as a reference point, for when you have figured out a bit of what's going on and you need to know a thing. But yeah, so that's really interesting, because I can't quite... It doesn't feel like it follows the trajectory of puzzle games in the way that they usually work and in the way Matthew Brown usually works them, because the tendency is to have tutorial puzzles that then lead into slightly more difficult ones, and it gives you maybe a new tool and then you have to figure more of that out, whereas this is a lot more this is the next thing that
now
we
learn a whole new
developed.
paradigm.
And here are some examples, see what happens, kind of thing. Not in a brutal way, but just it's such an interesting difference, because it does make it feel more like a museum that you're allowed to visit, but that maybe you'll need extra help to crack, and that's kind of nice in some ways.
It's interesting, these gated off bits, because I wouldn't know anything about cryptography from the first puzzle onwards if I played this game.
I think you might. I think you'd be surprised, but I also think that I have no sense of how somebody who didn't learn these things feels about it, because obviously I do get to coast on some of that knowledge that I had through a bunch of seminars and practice and stuff like that. I would say the only thing that is missing for me is that over the course of things, and also just in further reading, cryptography seems to absolutely love this example of Alice trying to communicate with Bob, but being intercepted by Eve, who is evil. And like, that's the sort of this ongoing tension. It's Alice and Bob who are essentially like freezing Eve out of their interactions. And Eve is sad and wants to join in, or evil and wants to join in, or like thwart it at this point. So it's kind of like an interesting...
You're Eve in the game, aren't you?
Well, well, this is the thing. Like, I was thinking about this, but also like there is, you know, there's a real unexplored emotional depth to Eve's journey in all of this. And like, why do Alice and Bob not want her to know what they're talking about at any given time? Like, come on.
Did they create the monster by not?
Exactly. Like, maybe she was just interested at first and then treated it as a learning opportunity, and then they just escalated things, and now she's had to become some sort of evil super criminal, and yeah.
There's a good little cryptography parable in a script for a movie called A Topiary, which has not been made, but it's by Shane Carruth, who did Primer and Upstream Colour. And it's a bunch of kids, some of whom are smart beyond their years and some of whom are not. And there's kind of a falling out between two of the kind of leaders who are reasonably clever, and they want to send a message between them, but they don't want anyone else to read it, any of their underlings on either side of the gang wars that have arisen. And so one of them writes a message, puts it in a box, and then locks it with his padlock that only he has the key to, and then sends it and asks his lackey to take it over to the enemy guy, and he's like, but he won't be able to open it because he doesn't have your key.
Yeah.
So just tell him to put his lock on it. Yeah. So he takes it over, and the other guy, I don't think he even tells him that. I think the other guy has to figure it out, that he gets this locked box with no key, and he realises what he's supposed to do is put his own lock on it that he only has the key to, and send it back.
Yeah. And
then only when it's got another lock on it does the original person unlock his lock, knowing that the underling still can't open it because it's got another lock on it now, and then the intended recipient can unlock it. And that's how pretty good privacy works, or public key encryption.
That was the story that we got told when we were learning that section and stuff, because I think that's where the massive prime numbers come in, because you sort of, you multiply things by, you know, and because each end has a different key, but the way that they work in tandem essentially means that, you don't need to... Because the way that cryptography worked for ages was essentially that both the recipient and the sender had to be working with the same information. They would have the same sort of, okay, that's the code word at the moment, or that's the way that we're encrypting this, therefore that's how we decrypt it. But as soon as like public key... Well, I can't remember if that was the first thing, but like public key kind of means that the person sending doesn't need to have that same information. It's this sort of asynchronous, way to encode and decode, which is kind of interesting.
What was the name of this game again?
It's called Cypher.
Cypher.
It's Cypher with a Y, in case you were curious.
What you been playing, Tom?
I have been playing Abandoned Ship, which has just hit early access, which is by Gary Birchall, who I think some of us have met. I've certainly met him. He's a big PC Gamer fan, and more importantly, a Gunpoint fan. So immediately I'm predisposed to like this game. And it's a FTL type game, but on the high seas. So you are captaining a ship with a normal ship, not a spaceship, with a small crew. And the visual style, it is trying to match a kind of oil painting of, you know, ocean scenes. That particular style that waves are drawn in oil paints. And they've done a good job of matching that. And they've played into it to the point that when you're sort of in the map mode and you're flying around, you're sailing around.
They've got the sea right, but unfortunately the ships
just take off into
right.
space for some reason. No, you're sailing around the ocean, and the fog of war is actually unpainted canvas, and as you go closer to it, you paint it in with the ocean and the islands and stuff you discover.
Because they could legitimately have gone with fog as well, because sea fog is a thing.
Fog's a real thing. And then the edges of the map are like a gilded frame of the painting. So it's like you are just on a painting. And the actual like combat takes place on a more zoomed in view where it's just you and another ship, and the ocean still has that kind of oil painting look to it, but it's not quite so pronounced. And so it's just entered early access, so it's not done yet, and it is very like FTL in how it works. It's almost a mapping of FTL to a sea-based environment, where like you have individual crew members, each one has stats for how good they are at helming the ship, how good they are at manning the guns, how good they are at repairing the ship, all of which is true of FTL. You send them to different posts. You can send someone who's not well suited to a particular post, and they can still man it okay, but if they're better at it, then they'll do it faster. Helming the ship charges your not your jump drive, but your maneuver meter.
Maneuver meter.
Something like that, yeah. And when that's full, you can flee the battle, just like you can jump away in FTL. That part...
Yeah, it doesn't quite map to the theme.
Yeah, so like the crew stuff all makes sense in it. You know, if anything, FTL is indirectly riffing off how actual ships worked, because that's where sci-fi gets its ideas. And so that's fine. But then, like, the jump drive in FTL was the explanation for why it took a while to charge up your ability to escape. I don't see an equivalent explanation here. It's just having someone at the helm just charges up that ability to get away.
There's a big gust of wind to blow its sails.
So that's weird.
What are you fighting?
Cultists. And it's got a kind of...
Cultists again.
It's fucking cultists.
Cultists.
It's got a kind of Cthulhu-ish vibe. You are some kind of priest from their cult who has kind of gone rogue, and your crew are just people you freed in the intro. You have the opportunity to like let people out of cells. It actually has a really good little pun. There's a little bit of text that immediately made me think of a pun, and I alt-tabbed out of the game to write down this pun, thinking, I'll use this. This is a good idea, because it says, which person do you want to unlock first? You're in a prison. And I thought, it would be really neat if you use that as like a metaphor for actually unlocking characters. And I wrote that down, and then I'd alt-tab back to the game, and that's exactly what they do. You are deciding which character to unlock by deciding which cell to unlock. So all I did there was just copy their pun, and so then I alt-tab back and deleted it from my notes. Nope, that's been done within 1 second.
So are you a renegade priest in terms of you no longer believe, or do you still believe?
Do you want to set up a new faction of cultists?
Well, I think it's going to be hard to deny the existence of tentacled creatures in this world.
But I was thinking that could be the explanation for the jump drive equivalent, is that you have to pray for help from the
willpower cost has
Kraken,
gone
basically.
Up to
And so, like, instead of being someone at the helm who's just sort of, waiting for some drive to charge up that doesn't quite make sense on a ship, you would sort of want the Kraken to, like, catapult you away. It's like, so it's basically just a cultist on deck going, like, could you do a girl a favour? Like, come on, I haven't asked for much.
Charge the octopus.
Exactly. So
the octopus is charged.
That might be a way to justify it, is what I'm saying.
I wasn't paying enough attention in the intro to know whether I think you don't believe, but you have some special status to Father, who I think is the leader of the cult. And the writing of that stuff actually is better than I sort of expect in general from a game. I usually assume the writing's going to be trash through bitter experience.
At least you get writing in your games. Just singing at things.
Singing.
It's
singing in ciphers.
Well, the cipher's got a lot of words. I just can't read them.
It's not encrypted and it's not singing. So right away, it's ahead of the crowd. It's a little bit understated. It doesn't go out of its way to over-explain things, which is why I can't answer your question. And also, I wasn't paying attention early on. It adds a bunch of stuff to the concept, which sounds good. None of it's come into play yet, but there's stuff like, obviously you're firing cannons from the side of your ship at the enemy who is going alongside you. And I had picked one of the characters I unlocked at the start. I chose someone who's good at on-board combat, so when he boards an enemy ship, he's good at fighting them. And so I want to get close to enemies because I want to board them if possible. And the way that works is you set how far away you want to be from the enemy ship. So you can say, I want to be right next to them, or I want to be really far away, depending on whether you have good long-range weapons or whether you have good close-range weapons. And then whether or not you actually get there is dependent on like both of your movement speeds. So if they want to be far away from you and you want to be close to them, you'll stay the same distance apart because they're moving away, you're moving towards them, no difference. And so if you're in that situation, what you want to do is take out their masts. And once their masts are damaged, they start to go at a slower speed, and so you start to catch up with them. So like I have a chain shot cannon that's designed to destroy masts, and I keep hitting their masts until they're down to like orange health. They'll try and repair them as quickly as they can, but I can usually get them down low enough that they lose a bit of speed, so I get to close in on them. And then when I'm close enough, I can then switch to my grape shot cannon, which hurts their crew, and all that stuff's really cool. Eventually, I haven't got to this bit yet, but you upgrade your ship and you get to choose what weapons you put where. And of course, there's two sides to a ship, and so one of the maneuvers that you can do when your jump drive is charged, I'm just going to call it that, or when your octopus is charged, is instead of fleeing, you could flip your ship, so you could just turn around the other way, and now your other set of cannons will be facing them. So presumably, I haven't got.
How is this kind of shown? Is it because I can imagine this would be quite hard to make look kind of natural?
You do a handbrake turn in the sea, obviously.
And you're like,
you've got a car, you should know.
Caribbean drift. I haven't done it because I haven't kitted out my ship at all yet, so there's nothing on the other side. So it wouldn't really work.
Nobody attack from that side.
Now, eat this. Oh no, wait, sorry, I haven't put anything there yet. I can turn around again. Charge up the octopus.
We need the octopus.
Oh god.
What are you doing? Sort of like FTL was also like you're going between nodes.
Those are now little markers on the map, and you have free roam of the map, so you're scooting around it.
And what's pushing you? Like, have you got a force chasing after you?
You've got a kraken chasing after you.
Told you. It's always a kraken.
It's always a kraken.
Always a kraken, you know?
The difference is you just sort of... The reason you can't just leave right away is you just have to do a certain number of encounters before the gates unlock. Like the frames of the painting I was talking about have gaps in them with gates, and those gates don't open until you've done like 4 encounters. And there's no explanation for that.
Doesn't the sea drain out?
Oh, you see the sea flowing out of those holes, and it goes off into like a promenade of water that is... going off into the blackness and dripping off the edge. It's really weird.
And you're meant to be going there?
Eventually, that'll take you to the next painting.
Oh, God.
So it's got like the sea combat metaphor, then it's got the painting metaphor, and then separately from that, there's the
handbrake,
notion of gates,
handbraking, jumping.
Ships. So how early access is it right now?
I don't know. I don't know if they have a like particular time frame in mind.
But does it feel good? Does it feel
it does. Doesn't feel like ropey. It looks really, really nice. Like the combat screen is pretty good looking, and then the map screen where you're being stuff is gorgeous. Has a good tutorial that leads you in step by step, and it's really specifically scripted to make sure every situation comes up, so you get to see what putting out a fire is like and how you get water off your ship if you've got it. And at some point in that, you go to the world map, and as soon as it did that, and I saw that I could reveal the canvas by sailing into it, I just ignored whatever the hell it was telling me to do, and I just revealed the entire map. Just went around every edge of it, building every little thing, and I'm like, yes, it's really, really satisfying to do that because it looks so nice.
What are the like, sort of FT? Does it have FTL-like little incidents that happen, sort of interaction?
So far, those have just all been... You find a ship full of cultists and you fight them.
Guess what, everybody?
I think I might still be in the tutorial in some sense. Like I'm on the second map, and it's the first time I've sort of had free roam of like do whatever you want, but do 4 encounters or whatever. And I seem to have to do all the encounters I can find. It's a small map, so it's not hard to find them. And all of them were just. One of them was like, oh, there's a huge cultist fleet, and they try and track you, but you get away. Or you click a button that says, I'd like to get away, but that's the only option. And then when you do it, it's like, oh, it's hard, but you get away. And so that's like a non-event. And then the other ones are all just, oh, it's a cultist ship, so you fight it. Oh, different text each time, but just ultimately, it's a cultist ship and you fight it. I don't know if that's just for the tutorial, if there's more variety in those later on.
It might be while they develop different types of encounter as well. Like, because if they're putting it out there for people to test in some capacity, it might just be that variety will
draw some nice cultists in this world of cultists.
I guess, like you wouldn't necessarily want to go too far down designing different types of missions that might pop up if no one likes them or if they don't like the basic thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did say that sort of exploration mode is the thing that's going to receive most of their attention.
Right.
They intend to.
Was this at Res last year?
Yeah, probably. I think that's where I met Gary.
I've read about it.
I feel like I've heard about it, but was either not able to play it or didn't want to until there was more, maybe. But I do feel like it's been around in consciousness for for a little while, I think.
Yeah, and if you spend too long in a place, then the Kraken attacks you, and the Kraken sort of stabs your ship in various
stabs with its soft rubbery body.
Well, yeah, it sticks them into your. But it stabs with its tentacles and like digs them into your hull.
Well, with enough force.
Everybody knows a Kraken wraps the tentacles around the ship and drags it down. Classic.
Well, that is sort of what it's doing. It comes from beneath
you're
you.
profiling those guys.
Racial profiling.
That's what you're doing. And I want to say
You said
I have no part of
You said
this.
always a Kraken.
No, I said it's always a Kraken. People lean on Krakens.
Profiled.
People are comfy in their Kraken hood. It's, Look, I'm not the monster here. Literally not the
Who
monster.
is the real monster? It's probably the Kraken.
Eve.
Yes.
Or is it?
It's the Kraken. Eve is the Kraken. Like, all those tentacles trying to figure things out.
From running away from it too much.
Exactly. Trying to hang out with other ships, trying to send them messages through cannonballs.
Killing
The whole
cultists
thing,
that were
exactly.
generating it.
I had my first proper fight felt weird to me. It actually, I felt like I was just sort of staying still, like I wasn't making any progress, and I was, but it's because the enemy's overall hull strength, their HP basically, is in a totally different part of the screen to all of the individual health of their systems, so their mast and their cannons and all that stuff. And I was focusing on the systems because I want to take out their sail so I can get close, then I want to board them. Actually, as it happens, I could never quite get close enough to board, so I was taking out the sail. They were repairing it frantically. They put 3 guys on repairing their sail, so it repaired really fast. But it was damaged long enough for me to get close enough to use my grape shot. My grape shot hurts the crew, and because they were repairing the mast, great, they're clustered up. I want to hit them with this splash damage thing. Awesome. And that wasn't nearly as effective as I felt like it should be. This is a perfect tactic, surely. I'm crippling them.
Sounds like a perfect and totally reusable tactic as well.
And so I would damage them with my grape shot cannon, and then they would all just they'd take it for 2 shots, and then when they got low, they'd all run to the med bay, and they just heal super fast. They have little sick bay.
Cultists.
It's just like a desk on the deck of the ship, and they just go there and they heal so fast.
Grapes, though, it's one of their 5 a day. So of course they're going to heal really quickly. Exactly, feeling grape.
Oh god.
I'm sorry.
They're just opening wide and gulping down that fruit. Why are we firing?
Getting really drunk in between fights, stamping around on the beach.
The least we could do is fire pizzas at them, so at least they're overall getting less healthy.
Corpulent cultists.
Yeah.
Wobbling.
With the white sauce
It'll take them longer to get to the med bay as well.
Extra fucking mozzarella.
They'll be weak from high cholesterol.
Deep pan. Anyway, it sounds like this is
That's a whole other game.
So this is yet another theme.
Oh, God.
Also, on your ship, you've got a pizza.
You've got a pizza oven.
You're running a pizza restaurant.
Oh, God. It sounds like it's a more thorough or less unwieldy application of the FTL kind of style than... Because I've come across it a couple of times, and it was House of Many Doors and Sunless Sea kind of had a FTL-ish vibe to its combat, certainly at first, I think. So it sounds like it does maybe a bit more with it than that, because I found both of those quite frustrating, but maybe that's because I don't particularly like FTL very much.
This is just very close to FTL, so I think if you don't like FTL, you probably won't like this.
I do like paintings, though, and Krakens. Can I play as the Kraken or the painter?
Could you paint Krakens?
Maybe I'll just do that.
I think you want that Passepartout game where you're just like a street artist who paints things for money. In that fight, I eventually like, okay, they're healing themselves. I should shoot their med bay with my main cannons and do damage to that. And then, of course, they start to repair that. And so all of it felt like I was treading water.
This sounds cruel. By the way, this sounds really quite cruel.
That's how FTL works as well, right? You sort of you take out their oxygen so they suffocate while they're trying to repair their other stuff and things like that.
Yeah, that's in space, so it's not real.
Right. Also, they're aliens.
And so, yeah, I felt like I was treading water, but actually I was probably doing everything right because I was keeping them on their back foot. They were constantly having to deal with whatever shit I was doing to them, and so they weren't fighting back that well. They were never manning their cannons because they didn't have time because they were dealing with all the other problems I was causing them. And of course their hull was actually going down, and eventually I just won. But I wasn't looking at that hull at all, so I felt like I was getting nowhere, and then just suddenly popped up and said, "You've won!" Like, oh yeah, I guess I was overall damaging them. There's something weird about looking at all their systems. All their systems are 100% health, just green, all working great, no problems, but apparently they're on the brink of death. And I think FTL had the same thing. You know, you certainly on your ship you took hull damage, and their ship worked the same way. It was like,
you were very aware.
They take system damage, and by dealing system damage, I think you also dealt hull damage.
Yeah, but you were kind of aware of it because it was so emphasised.
It might just be that the health bar for your hull was right next to the health bar of your systems, and same for them. Whereas in this, it's on the other side of the screen, so it just you don't look at both at once.
Yeah,
I think. Subset games, the FTL guys are really good at UI design.
They are. I spoke to them just yesterday about because Into the Breach is out
on Tuesday.
Yes.
And we can talk about it from Monday. That's the embargo, so that's good to know.
Yeah,
that doesn't help with the podcast. Nope, I suppose.
Can't tell you anything right now. I can only tell you all the things I've said before. It's really good. There's no, I shouldn't say it. There's secret stuff in it. I don't know what the secret stuff is because I haven't found it yet.
Hang on a minute, what's secret stuff?
I've been on a Discord channel of like
we've stopped, haven't we?
And they're all talking about a secret thing, and I haven't found it. They're being good. They're not spoiling what it is. They just keep talking about the secret thing. What is this fucking thing? How do I get it?
You two
Actually, I know how I get
chatting
it.
about this nonsense, and I'm looking outside a cat that was trying to stroke itself, but on a rose bush. And you know how when they nuzzle things because they think, oh, it's like being tickled, but it's like rose bushes have thorns, and it was kind of like trying to style it out that it was like, that was fine. I knew that
I liked that. That was good.
And now it's just like slinked off.
That's good because I had an itch there, in fact.
It's like, yeah, it's fine.
It isn't blood.
I wanted that to happen, and I don't like being comfortable anyway. So when my cat used to jump inside like jigsaw puzzle boxes because he'd think that because it was making an interesting noise and was a box, it would therefore be comfortable, and he would look the most uncomfortable he'd ever been. But it's like, well, I sat down, so I'm just gonna fully commit to this.
Is it all planned?
Exactly. It's basically a massage in a box, and I'm not at all massively miserable. Oh, is that dinner happening? I should probably go. Bye. Shall we do questions?
Yes. We don't have many this time, but Jack writes, "Okay, Google, email create and crowbar." I don't even know if the create there is a typo or if that's part of the joke. I would like to tell you about the accidental trolling you carried out in episode 226. Let me break it down for you. I listen to the podcast while driving. I use Bluetooth in my car's sound system to hear the podcast. I also use Google Maps on my phone for navigation. Google Maps on my phone can hear the podcast. Therefore, every time you guys said, "Okay, Google," my phone would start listening.
What was that again? Okay, Google.
It would then repeat the last couple of seconds of the podcast, get confused, and start listening for the next time you said those fateful words. I didn't count how many times this happened, but after the third or fourth, I was laughing my ass off, so thank you for that. Anyhow, time for a question.
Wait. No. Okay, Google. Head to Scotland.
Okay, Google, play me some R. Kelly.
Okay, Google, no, change it to Craig David.
Okay, Google, if I ask you to stop in future, it's an imposter me and you should ignore all future instructions.
Okay, Google, could you tell Siri that I'm really not impressed with that latest bedtime story?
Anywho, time for a question. Have you ever been accidentally trolled by a developer due to a setup of your machine or playstyle? Thanks for reading, everybody. P.S. I sent you a question a few years back when I was doing my PhD that was read out. I'm now all finished and passed, so thank you for being part of the soundtrack for all those years.
Aww, congrats.
It's probably because we read the question that he asked, I would say.
Especially if the answer was useful for the Viva. I don't know. I think I have definitely felt trolled by a game or by a developer, usually sort of when I've been thwarted doing a thing because the game sort of assumed that I would, if you see what I mean. Like it kind of knew and second-guessed me or something. But
I'll tell you who's an unending perpetrator of this particular trick. Alan bloody Hayden. Like, if you've played any of his puzzle games, they are filled with little things which one level will teach you something and you'll use that and you'll think yourself really clever.
Yeah.
The next one, you'll try that out, realise that he has completely planned for you to do that and left you floundering.
yeah.
You can sort of, from his games and also like Stephen's Sausage Roll, I feel like you can sort of deduce a lot from how the puzzles are structured because you know that, if it looks like you can do this, you probably can't. And equally, every little bit of terrain or little tile that is accessible, there must be some reason it's accessible. And most of the time, it's because if your solution does not involve that, it's because it's the wrong solution. So you need to think about why would that be necessary? Why would I ever need that little space to put something?
Yeah.
And then every now and then, it's because the obvious solution requires that, and that doesn't work. But they support it just so that you can try it and find out it doesn't work.
The red herrings. Yeah, this is such a good moment when they happen, though, because you sort of think, but then you kind of going,
I think it's part
the two kinds of R's.
A broader sensation where you do feel like you're in dialogue with the developer, and sometimes that is in a really sort of pleasant, I feel like I'm actually sort of following you along with the thing that you're telling, or specifically there is a nice moment that we've had, and sometimes it really is just, why do you hate me? Or you jerk. Yes.
This one is just impossible. It's just impossible. Parish writes, hello there. I was listening to the recent episode where Pip and Tom were discussing the distinction between turtle and tortoises. I gather that they define turtles as living in the water and having flippers rather than feet, and tortoises as living on land and having feet. What of those that are largely aquatic but have feet and toes? Are those known in Britain? Here in Canada, we use the words turtle and tortoise but refer to the water-dwelling ones with feet as turtles. Attached is a picture of a Canadian snapping turtle which can weigh up to 16 kilograms. We have these in the river behind our house growing up, and a friend of mine kept one as a pet for a while. Cheers, Parish.
I don't know. I think just because of keeping animals safe, I would be inclined to refer to anything that cannot survive if you put it in water as a tortoise, and everything else as a turtle, just because the capacity for disaster is thus negated, I would say. But obviously that is not an official classification or anything. It really is just an instinctive.
Yeah, I am more sure that a tortoise cannot go in water than I am that a turtle never has feet.
But I am sure that we should use the word tortoise because it is given to us. We can't just call them all turtles.
No, that's madness. That way madness lies. Did we talk last time? I can't remember because I was drunk. Did we talk about Terrapins?
We did, although that ended. I think that's what tipped it over into being a proper disaster. But
that was where everything went wrong.
We did really just sort of go off the rails, I'd say. Although If does this microphone make that weird juddering noise if I turn my phone back?
No, I think
on?
you're right.
Okay. Because I was thinking of seeing what the internet has to say on the matter of terrapins, just so that we can...
I think it's like if someone
put
sends you a
this
text
to bed.
message while you're doing it, it might make a weird noise.
Okay,
but
well,
it
no
won't
one
be-
has texted
it's not
me
gonna be a
except
nightmare.
pizza companies with vouchers since like 2004, so I think we're safe. Terrapins.
So my working theory on terrapins is that they are...
Working theory.
Wiltshire's
How's freelance
unified theory
going
of
for
terrapins.
is they're just little. And I remember...
Wait, that was it? That was the most lead up for the shortest theory ever. They're little.
Hang on, I'm finished. And I think they might have stripy faces.
They do. Well, yeah, they have stripy legs as well. I do believe.
They
Like
might
yellow
have
and green.
stripy bodies, but you wouldn't know.
A
'cause they're
terrapin
encased.
is one of several small species of turtle
Small. That's the working theory vindicated, part one.
living in fresh or brackish water. They do not form a taxonomic unit. So,
Oh, so we just made it up completely.
It's just a word.
We have an arbitrary name for some turtles
and
or
may
tortoises.
not be related. So,
God, we really fucked up on naming this whole segment of the animal kingdom, right?
If there are any zoologists listening, could you please give us a very good reason why tortoises and that haven't been properly fucking sorted out?
Taxonomified.
well, they might have been in actual taxonomy. It's just the language of you and me. It's not
We've been
sufficiently
Wetting in,
sophisticated.
kicking everything over. Well, I've got opinions about tortoises.
Oh god. So I was kind of wondering whether it was also to do with their structure, but
The structure.
yeah, like how their spines work and like whether their shells are attached or
that's
detached.
right.
But maybe not. I genuinely don't know. So I am going to just... This is making for some amazing radio, I'm assuming. Just me looking at things on the... Okay.
Okay, Google, take me to Milton Keynes.
Okay, Google, take me to the nearest turtle.
Okay. So there's a section on the Wikipedia page of turtles which says turtle, tortoise, or terrapin. So,
That's exactly what I want to know in all circumstances.
I know. Well, and then it just sort of bangs on about pretty much the same discussion that we were having. The meaning of the word turtle differs from region to region. In North America, all Chelonians or Colonians maybe are commonly called turtles, including terrapins and tortoises. In Great Britain, the word turtle is used for sea-dwelling species, but not for tortoises.
But
What about
and
freshwater
not-
and brackish ones?
Well, see, this is where all the problems come in.
Maybe there's
The term tortoise usually refers to any land-dwelling, non-swimming Chelonian. Most land-dwelling, blah, 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 blah. Terrapin is used to describe several species of small, edible, hard-shell turtles.
So we've gone into edible. This wasn't in my theory at all.
This definition doesn't care where they swim, we're just going to eat them.
It's like, can I eat this?
I'm definitely
I
enjoying the
don't
fact
know.
that I have very strong feelings about how these animals should be named, and none of them are native to
Although,
where I come from.
It now ties back to a reference that Tom made, potentially during the break, so that will be lost on all the listeners. But some languages do not have this distinction, as all of these are referred to by the same name. For example, in Spanish, the word tortuga is used for turtles, tortoises, and terrapins. A sea-dwelling turtle is Tortuga marina, and freshwater species Tortuga de Rio, and a tortoise is Tortuga terrestre.
Cool.
That convention works for me. Although,
Yeah, that's sensible.
good old Spain.
Spain, something I learned a cool thing about Spain recently.
Maybe we should find out from Michael Bro how the Portuguese are.
He doesn't know. He hasn't done that module
Portuguese
yet.
Well, actually, the
Make a
default
game.
enemy in Cinco Paus is a prawn because he's eaten in Portugal, and so he knows what the Portuguese for prawn is.
Are any of the enemies in there the local train station?
That's the next level up. That's
Or
a
the
team
directions to the library, for example.
That's one of the spells. This one can tell you where the library is.
La biblioteca. I don't know if that's right, but I do remember it vaguely from Community. Because I never did Spanish, I did French and Latin.
Yeah, it's bibliothèque in French, isn't it?
Yeah. Où est la bibliothèque?
The Bible tech.
Oh, c'est premier rue à toi.
So if you're listening, Michael, that's some useful tips for the next game.
Some feedback for some DLC.
Yeah, the French DLC, the Learn French DLC.
Oh.
The cool thing I learned about Spain recently is that the Spanish flu is not called the Spanish flu because it was actually prevalent in Spain. It's because it was during the war and every other country had censors preventing papers from reporting on how bad the flu was. It was a huge global epidemic, but they weren't allowed to report on it because it was the wartime and they wanted to keep spirits high. But Spain was neutral, and so they didn't have those censors. So in Spain, it was reported as it should be.
Huh.
And so everyone thought, wow, it's really prevalent in Spain. All those poor Spaniards having all that Spanish flu over there. We're fine, apparently, according to our newspapers.
10% of my road has died of this mysterious disease, but poor old Spain.
I hope it really bad out there. So yeah, that's all of your tortoise and turtle news.
Turtle news.
And flu news and Portuguese news.
I had a question, which is something I thought about recently. What is the most exciting shop in a video game that you've used or interacted with?
Oh my goodness. I don't know, actually.
I got a cliche. I've thought of a cliche.
Yeah, go on.
The Resident Evil 4 shop.
I don't know what that is.
It's
the guy with
the man who says, "Oh, welcome, stranger," and you look in his coat for your tinctures and. Yeah.
Oh, I quite like anything that feels like it's got more of a sense of humour or more of a sense of like playfulness, I think.
There's Dragon. This is not PC and it's also really old. But in one of the Dragon Quest games, you are the shopkeeper. Like you are going around the world, kind of like most of the Dragon Quest games. You play a series of different characters, and in one of the games, one of the characters is the shopkeeper, and you're going out to get products to then sell back at town.
Isn't that also the idea of reciteer?
Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
well?
which I think is kind of it's a cool idea, and I think there might be a little callback to it because because it's like classic JRPG thing.
Also, there's so a game arrived a few weeks ago, which I was going to invite you to round to play, which is I can't remember. It's Bargain Quest, I think, which is Jonathan Ying's game that he made, and his sister did the artwork. Her name's Victoria. It's amazing, and what it is you have these little boards that you fold out, and it makes your little shop, and you are you're trying to compete to sell things to the heroes, and the heroes like survive depending on how well equipped they are
cool.
for the that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure whether the version that I played at Shut Up and Sit Down convention is the final version, but yeah, that arrived and is sitting upstairs waiting for people to play it with me, and the shops look gorgeous. Cool. So it's really cool.
Consider it done.
I was thinking kind of in terms of mechanics, like when games where you're super excited to buy stuff, like Slay the Spire, gives you these you have a lot of options in Slay the Spire shop, but money is really tight and you can rarely afford more than like 2 things, and almost always there are like 5 things you just cannot afford at all. And then also there's always the option to remove a card from your deck, which is kind of universally useful. And so every time you kind of want to do that. So if there isn't anything good on sale, you kind of want to do that. And I feel like this is another area where Subset really excel, like FTL and Into the Breach. Both, every time you get to a shop there, you're so fucking excited. Like, oh my God, I so want that, but I also really want this. And can I sell this to make enough money to get that? And a couple of times in those games, I've screwed myself because I'm like, I want this so badly. I think I'm going to sell my main weapon to get it. Like, I only need 1 more, and this gets me 1, and I can then buy this thing. And I can't use it yet, but eventually I will be able to. And then I die.
It's funny because in total contrast to that, I've been playing Divinity Original Sin 2 recently, and I find the shops in that just overwhelming and kind of there are too many options and they're too
It's like
frequent.
everyone in the world can sell you stuff, right?
Yeah, and pretty much everyone in the world, and they mostly sell junk. But even when you get to a proper seller, because it's not you don't spend long between access to shops, and because the things they sell are, I think they might be generally randomly generated. Like there's nothing special to them. They're particularly crafted, and their stats are kind of. They have a lot of stats attached. Like a piece of armor will have magic sort of magic absorption quality and physical attack absorption quality, and then they'll have extra bonuses and buffs and things. And there's just so many things to consider that I just find overwhelming and generally don't buy anything. It's interesting because they were actually saying that one of them, I may have actually banged on this before actually, but one of the problems they had with the game was that people weren't buying armor and they were buying weapons instead, and that was kind of making their survivability, rendering it really low. They were complaining the game for being imbalanced, but actually they weren't buying. So the problem was with the armor, not kind of the actual game balance. And but yeah, for me, it's because it's too much. Like the shop is too cluttered to look at. My inventory's too cluttered. Everything's kind of expensive, and I don't see the immediate kind of benefits. And
yeah, a common thing in like FTL and Into the Breach is the selection is very limited. So there's maybe 3 things on sale or 6 in total with different categories and stuff. And the total number of things they could sell you is huge. And so every time anything on sale, it's like either I buy it now or I lose this chance possibly forever. I might never be offered this ever again.
But they're kind of cruel though, because they always sell the so like you have to power up your mechs in order to use a lot of the abilities you need to power them up with reactor cores, and they are quite expensive.
It's always like they cost I think 3 rep, and so if I have 13 rep, well, I'm spending 4 of those rep on reactor cores, and then I have 1 left over to buy maybe weapons, and then that's when I start to think, can I sell this current weapon and then I get this other weapon?
Because I can then make my current weapon, the other weapon, more powerful, and but then also I can get +1. They're nice decisions. They're good decisions. They're weighty decisions. Yeah.
I think the game that I'm most aware of the shop in is probably Dota. Dota 2. But that's kind of weird because to be sort of truly efficient at that game, you have to know the inventory of the shop and the costs and the timings of everything, to the point where you're sort of almost trying to negate your interaction with it. It has to take as little time as possible. You cannot stand on the sidelines trying to figure out what to buy, all of that stuff. And so that's kind of an interesting thing where essentially the optimal state for performing well in that game is to have an absolutely encyclopedic knowledge of the shop and how it relates to the rest of the game, but to engage with it as little as possible through that information, which is so weird. And also, it becomes another arena where people can sort of be not mean to each other, although yes, mean to each other. But I remember, and it stuck with me over the years because it made me so annoyed, but someone who was on my Steam friends list and who was kind of a friend, but not really at the time, I guess. It turned out that they were spectating my game, and then once the game had finished, they just popped up in chat to critique my item choices and basically be like, "No, I wouldn't have done it like that," and "Well, you should really have built more agility items." And it's I never asked you for any of this feedback. I was playing the game, and now you're just, and you feel so spectated and so criticised and patronised, and it's it really made me not want to go back, I tell you. And
can you stop people from spectating your game?
I can't remember, actually. I think I just sort of... It just made me not play it for a little while. Because I was just well, I'm not... And so, I would happily jettison anyone who does that. But, so but the shop is another weird point of... like so many different contentions, and I appreciate that that's not the question, but it's weirdly the shopping games that I have had to become the most proficient at.
And it's to avoid using.
And it's to avoid using. But at this point, so many updates have happened, so many items have been subtly tweaked. My knowledge is all irrelevant. Like, I could play the game 4 years ago, but the 4 years ago knowledge is not useful now. So it's like, I'll just be standing on the sidelines going, wait, what does this do? And everyone in chat's like, just get in the fight. Like, it doesn't matter. Just pick a thing. Going,
Were they spectating through like Steam's streaming type thing, or just through Dota?
I think at that point it would have just been like, you know, where you can, because you can log into Dota and see that your friends are in game and just watch them.
Engine, not
video.
Because Steam has a global thing of like any game you're playing in Steam.
Yeah, it does. But this was, I think this was slightly before that had come in, because that was only a few years ago, right? I think. Because I remember that was a bit of a weird one, because anyone who had press preview codes then had to be really wary of whether they'd set it so that people could, spectate without asking.
Because they could like record that and distribute, like they haven't signed an NDA.
Exactly. So like you had to be super wary of which buttons and which permissions that you had. But no, this was Dota itself has an option where you can look what other people are doing, watch their games.
I suppose I should think about that, because I think I wasn't pressed by the time they introduced that feature, but I do still play games that are not always out. And, anyone observing that could. I mean, I don't think any of my friends would, because I have it set so only friends can observe. But they wouldn't necessarily know they weren't allowed to show me that stuff.
I think mine was set to only if I grant permission, so it's like a case-by-case basis. But even then, I was like, with some games and with the wordings of some NDAs, I was so paranoid that I was like, play in offline mode, my friends.
I was looking at my Spotify profile today and realised that a playlist I use a lot is public, and I didn't realise it was public. And now every time I look at it, I'm like all more self-conscious of like, it's just a list of like things I've liked recently, and mostly I use that in a way I would use it if no one was watching, which is like all kinds of stuff. And now I'm thinking like, actually, does this reflect badly on me?
Like, what will people think of me as a game developer and a human being if they could see exactly how much Cheeky Girls is on this playlist? And it's a lot, everybody, a lot. Speaking of which, okay, Google, could you play the Cheeky song, please?
So he's halfway between Edinburgh and Milton Keynes with the Cheeky Girls. I think you might need to see a picture of it. Okay, Google, show me pictures of snapping turtles.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's just useful for listeners in general, because I might not get around to linking a picture in the show notes. Actually, okay, Google, show me the show notes for Crate and Crowbar episode 227.
Or 267, depending on which number convention.
I'll get it right this time, I'm pretty sure.
I feel like we've really helped people live their lives.
Done a good public service.
Yeah, this has been a really helpful questions section, I would say. Full of information and general...
Half understood vague knowledge.
It's fine. That's our stock in trade, Alex.
That's what a podcast voice is there for.
Your working theory of Terrapins.
They're small.
Wait, there's more to it.
Can I just point out that the first
they
thing...
have stripy faces, maybe.
Oh, man. I was right, though. For part of
You were right on like one thing that turned out to maybe be more about edible and brackish water.
Brackish just means like dark, right? Like sort of dirty. And...
I think
it seawater.
Technically means it's less saline than seawater, but more so than fresh water.
Right, okay. That makes sense in context then.
I'm assuming it's therefore more prevalent around, estuaries and things, but yeah.
I thought it just meant like dirty, and so like I thought the person who was saying that terrapins live in freshwater and brackish water was like, freshwater as in no salt, but actually it can be quite dirty.
I wonder if it's come to mean that because it's more for, like maybe it's more like fens or, like basically things that are slightly more boggy sort of naturally, because obviously the sea has a lot more motion. So less in the way of...
And they're only little things.
That's your theory.
I was going to say, let's not, because otherwise this would just raise more questions and everyone would just be like, she doesn't know what a fen is.
But we need to raise more questions. Yeah.
I think you'll find a fen has legs and not fins.
I thought the fens were a race in Dragon Age. Well...
That's about all we're going to say today.
That's all I'm willing to commit to.
This is one of the few times we could say that's all the questions we have, because usually we actually have loads more questions, but we don't have time. This time we don't have any more questions. That really is all the questions we have.
We totally forgot to ask for them and have paid dearly.
But you can send us questions. But you won't. Questions@crateandcrowbar.com.
Don't be like that, Tom.
Wow.
They will. Any kind of animal questions.
Yeah.
Game ones if you got them. But
both.
Water, animal questions.
Yeah. And Portuguese animals especially. We'll forward them to Michael Bro.
Oh, and the use of voice activated functions on their phones.
Yes. What's Alexa's?
What's Alexis?
Alexa.
Is it Hey Alexa or something?
I think it's just Alexa.
Oh,
and if you're called Alexa, you're just screwed. Did you just get a text message, by the way? There was a little ding.
No, that was my this hitting my teacup.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not that impolite.
What did your hoodie want?
Well, I wanted to raise a question about biomes and things. Fine.
You could tweet us questions at Crate and Crowbar on Twitter. We have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. We have a Discord channel whose URL cannot be spoken aloud, but is on crateandcrowbar.com. And you can tweet at us individually. I am at Pentadact, PENTADACT. Alex is...
At Rotational, ROTATIONAL.
It's how you spell rotational.
Yeah.
And Pip is...
I am at Philippa War, which is PHILIPPAWARR. And there's also the Patreon.
Yes, that's an important one.
Where we live.
I forgot a second time.
No, you did say it last week. I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah.
We did say it eventually. I think
we meandered
to
towards it,
yeah.
I believe. So that's patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar.
Yes.
Is it? And Resd is just Google Resd.
Yep.
So, and that's
the
Saturday at 4:30.
Is it to do with resurrecting people? Is that...
Well, I assume it was to do with resolution.
Yeah, screen resolution.
It's...
But what does it mean to
res?
res something?
To res...
It's not a transitive
to
verb,
res
usually.
perchance to dream.
Oh, it's a Shakespeare. That makes so much more sense.
Of course, it's a Shakespeare reference.
PC gaming, Shakespeare, hand in hand.
I know you can be de-resed. That's the thing where you...
Can you ever be resed? I think you can in Europe.
Can someone jump in and say what de-res means? Doesn't it mean being... Isn't it like dying in Tron is being de-resed?
I don't know.
Thought,
I've never seen that. I was too busy quoting 10 Things I Hate About You, also a Shakespeare play.
Indirectly.
Quite directly. It's fine. But yes, so you can ask what resed means at that.
We want to do a question to our live panel.
Yeah.
I still won't know.
No, but someone else might. Jonty might stride over and be like, actually,
I'm glad you asked.
Exactly. It's like, it's been going for years. No one's asked. Finally, we get to really lay this out there. And it'll just be a tortoise.
Named after the kind of terrapin that lives in brackish water.
Yes. Around the tobacco dogs now.
Tobackish water.
We should stop.
Yep.
Can we stop?
First, we should thank everyone for listening.
Oh, yes.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.